We are about a month removed from me going to the Brisbane International Film Festival this year. I saw a ton of new releases. Some of them have just become a wide release now, so I am able to actually talk with you about these movies a little bit more in depth now that you have an understanding of some of these movies, because back then it was well before it had come out in a lot of theaters for some of these movies. Some of them still haven't released, and I'm still going to be talking about them with so much enthusiasm because this year's Brisbane International Film Festival was absolutely stacked. And today, I'm going to rank the 10 movies that I saw at this year's film festival. So, let's get into it. Starting right off the bat at number 10, I have Monster, the new film from Correator. After seeing this movie, it kind of shows to me that I'm not a massive fan of his work. He just does not make films on my wavelength. I can happily say though that if you are a fan of his work, you like films like Broker and Shoplifters, you're probably going to like this. Monster does follow a similar structure where it's kind of slow, and then it builds and builds and does have a very good ending. That is the best thing that I can say about Monster. Its ending is very powerful and quite moving. In terms of what held it back and puts it at the bottom of my list, firstly, it was a stacked festival, so that is a factor. But also, the structure of the film just did not work for me like I wanted it to. The idea of following quite a few characters didn't quite pay off the way that I wanted it to, and it felt like it detracted from the overall objective that Correator was aiming to achieve by the end of this film. Number 9, a pretty hot take I think here, Anatomy of a Fall. The almost French submitted film and definitely Oscar hopeful. It won a bunch at the Gotham Awards. It's definitely an awards player, and for me personally, I thought it was okay. I didn't really love it like I quite wanted it to. I felt like it was a little bit overhyped, and I think the Palme d'Or did boost it up a little bit. That's not to say it's a terrible movie. There are some very engaging moments. I definitely think the lead performance from Sandra Hüller was phenomenal. I would not be surprised if she does get a nomination at the Academy Awards. I think some of the framing was quite nice. And when we're in the courtroom, it is quite engaging. However, we do spend a lot of time outside of the courtroom, and those scenes just did not work for me like I wanted it to. I also thought that this film was far too long for what it was trying to achieve, and it's tonally quite inconsistent, and it didn't really work for me when we have such a serious scene, and then directly afterwards we have just goofy moments like a Quentin Tarantino style zoom in that is obviously played off for laughs right after a really tense moment. And scenes like that really just rub me the wrong way, and moments like that do hurt my experience with the film, so that's why this is quite lower on this list. Number 8, Earth Mama. So pretty much everything else on this list, I'd pretty much give a full thumbs up towards and say that I at least quite enjoyed it and think that they are good. Earth Mama, I think, just hits that mark. I do think at times it is quite forgettable, but it is a very interesting film about a story that we just don't see that much in cinema, so I quite appreciate that. This examines the system, especially in America, and how it almost keeps a lot of people down and forces them to go back to habits that were very destructive for them. This follows a woman that does have a drug issue, and she's fighting to get her kids back. And you see how tedious and difficult this whole process is, and how it kind of encourages her to fall back into these old habits. Now, that can make our protagonist feel quite unlikable, and it does come off that way at points, but I also do think that it is quite an honest interpretation of people going through this, because that's what we kind of see in day-to-day life. I think the ending in particular is quite strong. I think it really does bring home the ultimate message that first-time director Savannah Leaf wanted to here, and I think she does have a great eye for filmmaking. I cannot wait to see what she does next. 7, All of Us Strangers. Look, I think this film is very great. I don't think it's at the masterpiece level that some people have hyped it up to be, but I do think it is very compelling. It has some very strong performances. I almost compare this to The Sixth Sense in a lot of ways. Not because it's a thriller, even though it does hit moments that feel like a thriller, but because it is ultimately about dealing with a loss, and the way that it approaches that subject matter does feel reminiscent of the themes that The Sixth Sense tried to produce, and I quite like that. I really like the performances. Andrew Scott and Paul Mescal were absolutely terrific. I do think that it is very tragic at times. It does definitely make you feel something. In my screening at the festival, there were a bunch of people crying. I could hear a lot of sniffling. And it doesn't really prepare you for the absolute emotional trauma that this character is going to go through. You see kind of what he would think his parents would react to certain moments of his life, especially him being a homosexual. That is a big deal with this arc, and there's scenes like that that I think were really touching and were handled very brilliantly, I thought. Now, it does have some tonal imbalance. It starts off like a very tragic drama, then it goes to a thriller, then a drama again, and then a thriller. There were moments that almost looked like a horror movie at times. It was kind of insane. And it doesn't really prepare you for that because that's not what type of movie this is. And just that jarring nature of the complete genre shifts at points didn't really work for me all of the time. I also think some sequences are a little melodramatic, especially one that is supposed to be this big emotional release for us as the audience. It didn't always work the best because it did come off quite melodramatic. That is seen a little bit from Claire Foy's performance in this particular scene. Number 6, the short film from Pedro Almodovar, Strange Way of Life. I've never explored Almodovar's work before. This is the first thing that I've seen from him, and I quite liked it. It is stylish and interesting. The costume and production design is interesting at times. Sometimes the production design in particular is a little bit janky at points, but when it does pull it off, it pulls it off quite nicely. I thought for the 30 minutes that this ran, it was very engaging. I absolutely loved Pedro Pascal and Ethan Hawke in these roles. They were absolutely brilliant. My main issue with this one is, though, that it feels like a very engaging first act, exploring all of these interesting themes that do feel similar to Brokeback Mountain, but in a very different way and a lot more stylish. And I would have liked to have seen Almodovar explore this fully in a 2-hour feature film. However, it does cut off at a moment where I feel like we could keep going, and that can leave you quite shortchanged. Number 5, I have Late Night with the Devil. Now, this is probably the most underrated film that will be on this list, that you probably have heard nothing about. It is an Australian film starring David Dastmalchian. I'm so sorry if I mispronounced that, but we all know who he is. He's in all of these movies and has quite a small role, but he always does the job. And in this film, he gets the spotlight. He is the lead role. It really takes a lot of inspiration from many talk shows, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s. The directors talk directly about their influences at a Q&A after the screening that we went to, and that was really, really cool to see their thoughts and opinions on this movie and the process it took to get a lot of this made. It is very intricate with its production design and costume design. It really takes you back, and it's so stylish. So many aspect ratio changes, and then the concept of the film itself is just so interesting. You know, it's about a talk show host that's losing relevancy, and he tries to go balls to the wall with this massive show, and it explores this possession that may or may not be real. And the way that this film progresses and unfolds is so engaging. By the end of the film, you're completely hooked. And I'm kind of surprised that A24 didn't pick up this film, because it feels very much like an A24 horror movie. The type of spin that it has and how bonkers this gets. There are these really cool montages that bookend the film. I thought were so stylish and interesting. Really capture you straight away. I love the difference of color grading at points. We get full color, it's shot on film, and then you go black and white during the commercial breaks, and we get a lot of character development there. All very interesting, so stylish, and everyone in my screening was so engaged. I implore you, if this thing ever comes out near you, check it out. You will not be disappointed. It is, to me, the most underrated film of the year. I am so shocked that no one has talked about this out of the festivals because my entire audience really wrapped this up and enjoyed it. It was truly magnificent. Number 4, I have May December, the new Todd Haynes film. This thing, I did not expect to enjoy this as much, and now a month removed from this, it really has stuck with me. This film just is so subtle in the way that it executes its narrative, but yet it says so much, and you don't really get a full perspective on everything until the final scene of this film, where you can fully analyze everything that came before and really learn more about these characters. Some of the best performances of the year. Natalie Portman in the lead is absolutely amazing. Some of the best stuff I have seen her do since Black Swan. Julianne Moore, one of the best supporting performances of the year. She's so subtle, but yet she's such an imposing figure, and I really love the way that Julianne Moore captured that essence on screen. Charles Melton as basically a victim but is always denying it is also quite great, as you kind of see that he hasn't quite developed properly. This explores a relationship of someone who was in early high school getting in a relationship with someone who is far older, and they kind of play it off that he wanted to engage in that relationship, but there is just such a power dynamic there where it's obviously not the case, and because of that, our characters have a lot of repressed feelings, and the more and more you dive into this, the more sick you feel to your stomach at just how disgusting some of these actions are. Todd Haynes is absolutely brilliant with his direction here. So subtle and nuanced, but yet so gripping. I honestly was shocked at how much I love this film. Number 3, another hot take here, I have Next Goal Wins. Now, this was the closing night at the Brisbane International Film Festival, and honestly, it was the best way to close out the festival. You have all of these movies, some that require a lot of thought, and for me personally, I am exhausted by this point because I have seen a bunch of movies. They're all very late at night, and I'm working as well. It's just such an exhausting time. So all you really want to close it out is just a light-hearted movie with a lot of laughs, and that's what this provided. Taika Waititi may not work for a lot of people, and that's fine. I will always remain a defender. As someone who's born in New Zealand, he is kind of a big deal to me, and I really, really appreciate his direction and his style of comedy. He makes a lot of people from that part of the world feel very seen, and he does so here as well. And I think that a lot of people who aren't really familiar with these cultures aren't truly appreciating what it delivers on, because it really hits there, and that's what makes it so funny and so compelling at points. There is some great drama here. There's a lot of heart to this film. You know, it does sort of go into a kind of formulaic underdog story narrative at points, but the coding that Taika Waititi provides and the fantastic performances from our entire ensemble just make this such a good time. I was honestly shocked coming out of the theater that the reviews for this just haven't been very favorable, and I really have to disagree. Even a month out, I think that this film is fantastic. I would watch it again. Michael Fassbender in our lead role, brilliant. I absolutely love seeing this guy in films again. It has been so long, and then watching The Killer, and then this, it's just amazing. I'm so happy to see him on screen again. And once again, this whole ensemble, brilliant. Oscar Kitely is so funny in this movie, and Kai Mana, I really, really love, providing some dramatic scenes as well as some very funny scenes, playing off Michael Fassbender brilliantly. Number 2, a film that has pretty much released everywhere now, and one that I really, really enjoyed despite how divisive it was, and that is Emerald Fennell's Saltburn. I was really blown away by this. There were moments, of course, where I agreed with a lot of the criticism that has been going out to this film until we hit the ending, and I felt like it resolved a lot of the issues that I had to the point where I didn't care about them anymore, and I think made everything stronger. Barry Keoghan in this role, brilliant. He's just such a freak, and he is the best at it. So good. The final scene of this movie, you will know it when you see it. so brilliant. It just pops so much. The soundtrack, there are just some great needle drops in here. I've been listening to the soundtrack constantly since I saw it about a month ago. The style as well, it's so lavish and grand. Saltburn itself just really feels ominous and welcoming at the same time. It's quite interesting. And then so many great supporting performances. Jacob Elordi, we know if you've seen Euphoria, is quite a brilliant actor, and he just brings that here. I can say the same about Rosamund Pike. This is the best that she's been used for a movie since Gone Girl for sure. She just has so many great one-liners in this movie that will definitely make you laugh. And honestly, from the opening right to the end, I was just very engaged and interested in this movie. There are definitely some very sickening moments. There's one in a bathtub, there's one on a grave, and there is one where they talk about a vampire that were all very gross and definitely got some very loud reactions from our audience. A lot of cringing going on. But I think it works for the type of movie that this is. We're looking at a couple of people that are kind of unhinged. So the fact that we do get a couple of moments that kind of make your stomach churn a little bit, it is fitting for this type of movie and doesn't feel out of place. Emerald Fennell, I really, really love her direction. I do think that she's up there with Greta Gerwig for me in terms of just this new vision in cinema. Really brings a different perspective that we haven't really seen before. And her writing, to me, is just so sharp. I really couldn't go on enough about how much I really, really love this movie. Now, number one, I had been tossing and turning between this and Saltburn for the longest time, but about 2 weeks ago, I gave it some serious thought and went, no. Number one has to be Poor Things. Yorgos Lanthimos' tour de force. When I reviewed this movie, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5, citing a couple of pacing issues here and there, and there is a lot of sex in this movie. I think that if you don't really enjoy those scenes, this might not work for you, so that's just be warned. However, just really thinking about it more and reflecting on it, those issues that I had are just so meaningless now. It's honestly a 5 out of 5 to me now. Poor Things is up there as one of the best films of the year for me. It's just one that you just can't stop thinking about. Lanthimos to me has never been a top tier director in my eyes. I have liked some of his work. I do like Killing of the Sacred Deer, and then The Lobster and The Favourite didn't really work for me. Poor Things just did in so many ways. Its exploration of this central character, Bella Baxter, who is one of the most fascinating characters in all of cinema, has something interesting to tell, has an interesting story. To see this person develop, you kind of see a full evolution of this woman's life and her becoming independent and developing her own thoughts and feelings rather than just parroting those of the people that raised her. Seeing this is just so fascinating, and the framing device for all of this, of having Bella Baxter have a baby brain and then watch that develop, you watch her develop, just so innovative. I know this is based off a novel. I'll praise the novel if I have to. Very innovative stuff. The performances, fantastic all the way around. Emma Stone, of course, brilliant. She is probably very deserving of winning the Academy Award this year. It is one of the most interesting performances of the entire year. I think Willem Dafoe and Rami Youssef give great supporting work. And the same can be said for Mark Ruffalo. So funny in this movie. He's just such a great villainous presence, but yet he's so lame that you just can't help but laugh at him. So many great moments. The style, oh my god, is out of this world. It is the most stylish film of the year, and we have gotten some pretty stylish films released this year. The black and white and the color is all purposeful, and it just pops on screen. Watch this on the biggest screen you can. From the very opening shot, you can tell that you're in the hands of a filmmaker that knows what he's doing and is in complete command of his craft. I have not seen someone helm a film this way and just feel so confident about what they're delivering since Parasite. Now, that doesn't mean that it's the best film of the year. I still would say Oppenheimer is the best film of the year because Christopher Nolan does do something similar in terms of being in full command of their craft. But Lanthimos the way that he just fully embraces how wacky and strange this is and turning it into something really beautiful is just such a magnificent achievement. There's nothing more I can say about this movie apart from it's a true tour de force the whole way around. Obviously, some moments may turn off a lot of viewers. I wouldn't really recommend this movie to a lot of the casual audience who just want to see something a little bit more normal, because this is very weird. I think you need to level up your cinephile badge before you get to Poor Things. But if you're at that level, Poor Things, man, you are in for a treat. Such an interesting film, and one that I will never forget. And that is why this film comes in at number 1 on this list. And that is my ranking of the Brisbane International Film Festival. Probably the most stacked festival I have ever been to. So many fantastic films, so much unique cinema, and that's why I love going to the festival, and I cannot wait to go to the next one. It's always an absolute treat. Now, I do apologize if you were expecting some guests on this ranking. I was fully intending of having a friend of ours and my fiance on this list, because they went to the film festival with me, but we just couldn't get the timing right. I do plan on having my fiance in a future video. We're kind of planning it now. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be an interesting one, so make sure to look out for that. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.